Tonight, public outcry reaches the ears of the Senate after the Jedi Council refuses to dispatch Jedi to the front lines of the Mandalorian conflict.
And we continue our series looking at the Jedi Agricorps, how these strange monks are helping develop revolutionary breakthroughs in agricultural methods and technology.
Now, for a look at galactic weather. How's the Corps looking, Kai?
Right!
All that and more at 11. Younglings, gather round the map reader and enjoy another episode of Hoth Topics. My name is Ian, your Jedi Barsenthor, and joining me this week is the evil man in evil clothes. John, how are you doing?
What did you call yourself?
Barsenthor. It's, Kai, what's a Barsenthor? Do you remember the definition?
They're like guardian.
They're the protectors of the knowledge, I think.
Yeah.
Right. Whose voice is that?
That would be Kai, our special surprise guest.
Oh.
I was glad. I thought I could hear him.
Well, I conjured him using the Force.
Ugh, sorcery.
Yes. Yes, indeed. Sorcery it was. But I think that this very special episode of Hoth Topics needs a very special guest. So welcome, Kai. How are you doing?
Pretty good.
Excellent. Kai, you and I met through Star Wars, actually.
Yes, we did.
We were both members of the same guild in the Star Wars MMO, The Old Republic.
Yep.
So it's really cool to have you here. What got you into Star Wars in the first place?
Funny enough is, I got really into Star Wars when I was about 10 years old. I was playing the original Battlefront games, and I played the first Battlefront, and then, I didn't really know much about Star Wars when I first played it. I was like, oh, cool. Killing other people as dudes in body armor and helmets.
Huh.
And then I saw the trailer of Episode 3 on TV, like, one of those random TV spots.
Right, when it was coming out.
And then I was like, I want to go see that movie. And then one of my uncles who watched Star Wars back in the late 70s, and he said, okay, I'll go take you to watch it. And then when it came out, and I was just very mesmerized by the whole experience. I didn't know what was going on, but I just knew that I thoroughly enjoyed it. And towards the end of the movie, between the epic duel between Anakin and Obi-Wan, I was just very immersed into. I really wanted to learn more about this whole universe and stuff, and ever since then, I've been thoroughly involved.
Yeah, I can confirm you have been thoroughly involved. You went from playing Battlefront and not knowing anything about it to, for a short time, running a Star Wars role-playing guild. That is an impressive turnaround. So Revenge of the Sith was the first film you saw?
No, actually, I was living in the Philippines for about 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And the last year I was there, Phantom Menace came out, and my parents took me to watch it. And I have no recollection of it, but
So
there I was holding a cup with a little Anakin in his little pod racer.
Oh, that's cool. So Revenge of the Sith was the first one you remember.
Yeah.
But not the first one you saw.
Yeah.
We have a lot of friends, John, who are introduced to Star Wars in very strange and abnormal ways, don't you think?
We have a lot of friends that were also born in the 90s.
I was born in the 90s.
Exactly.
I saw them the right way.
You saw the original trilogy first?
Yeah, I did.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I will concede this point tonight.
It was right before the Episode 1 came out. I think it was like 2 years before.
Oh, gotcha. I saw them in reverse order.
Yeah.
And I had no idea what they were. And
Maybe.
I actually thought that they were part of the He-Man universe, because at my friend's house where we'd watch them, it was usually Return of the Jedi, He-Man Masters of the Universe Laserdisc, and then maybe Empire or A New Hope. But usually it would end with Masters of the Universe.
Huh. That is an interesting combo. I can kind of see how it works, though.
Yeah, when you're like 8. the whole idea of like franchises don't make much sense.
Yeah, it's the cool-looking action figure and the other cool-looking action figure on the cool-looking battleship toy. That's all that matters.
On the big silver CD.
Correct. So, Kai, what was what's your favorite character, if you have one?
When I first started out, it was mainly Anakin Skywalker because, Episode 3.
Right.
And enamored in just all the graceful fall. And then watching his story in a weird, rewatching Episode 1, then 2, and then jumping to the original trilogy. I was all about Anakin Skywalker, but then when the Clone Wars TV show came out on Cartoon Network, I got really immersed and involved with Plo Koon. Cause,
cool.
At first, I didn't know what to make of him, but then as the season progressed, you get to learn that he was the main reason why Ahsoka was a part of the Jedi Order.
Mm-hmm.
And then learning about his backstory made him my favorite character of Star Wars.
That's really cool. We keep meeting people who have love for all these obscure characters, and I'm all for it. It's awesome.
I have love for Plo Koon because he was my favorite character to play in Star Wars Jedi Power Battles on the Dreamcast. Not on the PS2. That game was terrible.
He had a yellow lightsaber in that game, correct?
That's a lot of things you're asking me to remember right there.
I'm pretty sure he had a yellow lightsaber, which incidentally is my favorite color lightsaber. Awesome, that's really cool. Do you have a favorite film?
Favorite film wise,
Star Wars specifically.
Yeah.
Oh darn!
Yeah, you can't say The Godfather or anything.
It was admittedly, I was probably in the minority when Episode 3 was still my favorite. Like, it has a place in my heart since it's the one that jump-started me into the Star Wars series, but Rogue One has jumped to my number one.
Really? Okay. Cool. Any specific reason why that one took over?
Because it explored the aspect of non-Force users and non-Skywalker family related. It was basically the nitty-gritty focus on the characters that we don't see in the main storyline.
Very nice. Very nice. Another Rogue One super fan here. It's a great film.
So, I've got a question for you real quick. Since
we
now? Kind of are jumping back and forth between Kai's first experiences and then like bouncing off our experiences. The first Star Wars you saw, is that different from your favorite?
Yeah, it is. I saw A New Hope first. I saw them in order basically. And as a kid, I think my favorite was Attack of the Clones because that was one where I was young enough to go to the theater and just enjoy the spectacle. But right now, if I had to answer, it would be Empire Strikes Back just because of the interactions between Vader and Luke. I really, really like. Mm-hmm. I love Yoda. All the Force-sensitive stuff that happens in that movie I really, really enjoy. And it's taking these characters that we already know and like really getting to know them more and getting more character development out of them. And it's kind of, again, Empire is... and we mentioned this in our first episode, Empire is the quote-unquote correct answer that people give all the time, but I don't think that it's my favorite for those same reasons. Like, it's my favorite because it's the one that A New Hope put the nail in place for my love of the franchise and my interest in Force-sensitive topics, mm-hmm. and Empire was the one that drove that nail in.
Yeah, I would argue that from a film technical aspect, Empire is probably the best.
I would
most
agree
accomplished.
With you.
But like I like you, I wouldn't say it's my personal favorite.
Right.
It's not the one that I go to when I'm bored
mm-hmm.
at home. For the longest time, Return of the Jedi was my favorite one.
Right.
Mostly. I think it's kind of like Kai, where that particular movie was the first one that I remember seeing in the franchise, and so it's the one that got me hooked. So it's always going to have the bigger place in my heart. But also, like Rogue One it's kind of pushing on it.
Right? Yeah, it's getting there. I hear that a lot from people, and I think it's definitely because of the well-roundedness of the film. It gives us something new, and it gives us something a little bit more gritty and down to earth. But it has the elements there of the people that we love in Star Wars in those characters. So if you're like me and you're a 4C fan, you've got your Chirrut Îmwe and Baze. I almost said
Boba
Boz.
Fett.
I almost said Boz. Your Baze, and they kind of represent that, follow the Force idea. If you're a big Han Solo smuggler, fringe of bad guy, good guy, you've got Cassian and a little bit of Jyn in there. Jyn, becomes the symbol of hope towards the end. I think she's got a little bit of Leia Luke combo going on.
Oh, definitely.
You've got K2SO, who covers your droid lovers. So that movie has a lot of elements to keep everybody happy while also providing something new. And it's been jumping to the top of people's lists since it came out. At least people that I talk to. And there are people out there who are just like, don't really like it. But majority-wise, I think it reaches the top half of a lot of people's lists.
And I think it's because it doesn't have the weight of the other movies of the main story. It's just kind of a dumb, fun adventure.
Right.
Kind of like there's a lot of Marvel movies that are very serious in the new MCU, and then there's some like Guardians where it's just fun.
Yeah.
They may not be the best movies, but they're just fun.
Right. And I think we're going to see more of that with these
the spin-offs.
We're going to go super deep serious in some, and we're going to go super nonsense whatever with others. And I think that is a good thing, because we're going to get more and we're going to get varied. So, on the note of the experience of Star Wars, Kai, do you have a favorite Star Wars experience that comes to mind? Something that really sticks out in your head?
Really sticks out into my head was, like, right after seeing Episode 3, I remember wanting old pop-out, not like the one that you swing out lightsabers, but the themed like Obi-Wan or the
spring-loaded ones.
The spring-loaded Anakin sabers, and I remember wanting that for my birthday so bad. And like, parents like to wave it off, and then come my birthday, like, see this long, enormous box wrapped into gift wrap, and I didn't pay, because I'm like, it's probably a long line of clothes, because kind of being raised in a
lightsaber box shaped container of socks.
And then when it came time to open the presents, and then I opened it, it was actually Anakin's pop-up lightsaber, and I remember.
Oh, nice!
I remember tearing the box, just ripping it to shreds, just wanting to get this saber out of the box as fast as possible, and then forgetting that it needs batteries. So when I turned it on, it sprang open. I was like, "Why is it not turning on?" And then I was trying to figure out for like 5 minutes. I was like, "Oh, batteries." Put in batteries, turn it on, and just swing it at things, swing it at the wall, swing at my brother.
Good target.
Trying to, be Anakin Skywalker, and just having fun with the thing until it just broke.
That's awesome, man. Awesome. Well, thank you, Kai, for joining us for this episode of Hoth Topics. John has a discussion he'd like to... I'm not going to use the word inflict, because so I don't want to say you're inflicting anything on me. However, you had an idea for a topic today, and it's certainly going to be an interesting experiment.
So, a couple days ago, as I was driving to work and from work, which is when I have my most fantastic thoughts, I had a very specific thought that I wanted to call you and talk to you about for a topic on the show. However, I knew that what I was gonna say might be hard for you to not get upset about without me getting my full thought out.
Didn't want me to get nerd ragey.
Yes, because I know how sensitive you are to certain topics in Star Wars, and I don't want to hurt my unique snowflake of a friend.
Dude, you... Okay.
So what I've done here is I've created a prepared statement that I will read to Ian, and it has 3 questions at the end. I kind of gave him a one-sentence primer on what he should be looking up or researching, But it's kind of this idea I have of like us having conversations where one of us does a little bit of research and then just drops a topic on the other, and then we see where it goes from there.
I wrote at least 3 pages of possible counter notes.
Yeah, when he told me he did this, I realized I may have misled him in what I was trying to do. But
yeah,
that's quite alright. I had to reassure Ian on multiple times as I was working on this that I am not intentionally trying to prod the bear, sort of thing.
See,
I had to reword some of my sentences so they weren't so antagonistic.
You wouldn't have had to do any of that if you had not, one episode prior, created a segment called Let's Piss Off Ian and made a theme song
No.
for
It's
it.
will this piss off Ian? It's not. It's just to find out if you will. This is, however, not supposed to be one of those segments, but it may as well turn into one. And I have the theme song queued, just in case.
I am going to be very open-minded and try to change your mind on these things, and then if that doesn't go well, I'll just have Kai for backup.
So now I will proceed with reading my prepared statement, but I will be turning off Ian's mic.
That won't help you. I'm loud enough.
It's true, but some of your groans will be muffled. Let's begin.
All right.
I would like to point out that I had to rewrite this like 4 times because as I was doing my own research, I realized that I lost track, and I actually wrote that inside some of the sentences that I've lost track. So please bear with me, Ian. Also, audience, and anyone else.
Like Kai?
Also Kai, yeah. He'll be fine.
I'll be fine.
Prepared statement now. The Jedi Order were a self-described and arguably self-appointed militant peacekeeping organization of the galaxy since before recorded time, or pronounced A-level canon. For this particular discussion, I will only be referencing canon sources. I will give leniency to examples from Knights of the Old Republic or the Old Republic Online, because I'm not sure whether or not these have been struck from canon or if they're somewhere in the C or lower class. At some point in the galaxy's history, the Republic and the Order became linked, and the Jedi became the enforcers of Republic law, being dispatched to mediate in disagreements between member systems when regular Senate channels failed. Some examples of Old Republic enforcement or upholding is the Jedi declare / lead a war on the Zygerians when they refuse to abolish slavery as demanded by New Republic laws, or Old Republic new laws. That's a very difficult sentence in my brain to think of. Another example is the conflict with Mandalore. Like Star Trek Klingons, I recognize it's hard to negotiate with a society that believes peace through anything other than conquest is dishonorable. But the Jedi really didn't pick this fight. And my last example here would be the Sith War, a war caused by the differences in religion. Similar situation as above, as the Order is fighting for survival, and not really instigating the fight. With the major conflicts in the galaxy concluded, the Jedi embraced a less militant role in the Republic. As the Republic disarmed, the Jedi became the enforcers or upholders of Republic law, and less like a specialized militant arm, taking on a negotiation role once again. There are many real-world examples of civilian religious law enforcement organizations that are sanctioned by ruling governments. Probably the most famous of these is the Committee for the Promotion of Virtue and the Prevention of Vice of Saudi Arabia, who, until 2009, could enact physical punishments with canes and whips on those they deemed to be breaking Sharia law. Another unexpected example could be the Spanish Inquisition, who looked to enforce Christian law in areas controlled by the Catholic Spanish monarchy. I don't want to go too much into real-world religion. The above were just for a real-world reference, and that's not what we are debating on the show. There are also examples of neutral military forces being used in conflicts as a buffer between opposing forces, such as the United Nations. They've been doing this for decades. They're as easy to recognize as Jedi with their white-painted vehicles and blue helmets. These units in a peacekeeping force are drawn from member states and are sent in to maintain a peace and not used as an offensive force, which is probably why in Hollywood movies they're unfairly portrayed as useless and far more of an annoyance. So Ian, here are my questions for you. There are 3 of them. Would you like me to read them one at a time and you answer, or would you like me to read all 3 of them and then you go from there?
Let's do one at a time, and that way we can get Kai into the discussion as well.
Okay, cool. So question 1. Is it right for the Republic to give law enforcement powers to a religious order whose morality/worldviews may be different from the cultures/star systems that they are now obligated to uphold?
Well, first off, John...
Also, I recognize that's kind of a leading question, but I think you understand.
Yeah,
where it's
but
going.
you're kind of backing me into the corner with only allowing me to use canon examples, and because there is not enough canon material on the Jedi Orders past in the current canon. So can I as a request, I would like to know if I can use some Legends sources, because it is way more.
We talked a little bit about the Jedi Order and canon a little bit earlier today, not in our podcast. I wasn't aware about how much had been stripped. Because we were talking about something different. For my personal examples, just a few moments ago, I only wanted to use canon. But if you have non-canon references, I'm fine with it.
Okay, cool. Actually,
I didn't want to back you into a box. That wasn't the intention, but I can realize how the question totally sounds like I am.
Well, no, it's not. It's not about the question. It's just the because I can answer the question, I think, with a satisfactory answer, but I need to draw on some of those sources to do so. But before I do, I actually want to get Kai. I want to get your 2 cents on the question before I answer mine, because basically this episode is going to be me talking for a while about a lot of things. So I want to make sure everybody gets a say.
Can you repeat the question again?
Absolutely. Is it right for the Republic to give law enforcement powers to a religious order whose morality or worldviews may be different from the cultures or star system, or may be different from the cultures of the star systems that they are now obligated to uphold?
Well, I mean, I would honestly say that it all depends on what is the Republic going through in the moment of time, because in Legends, the Jedi were normally there to help and keep peace when I'll say back how far would you say were when the Jedi had to essentially had to step in when the Republic was demilitarizing?
Are you asking for canon or legend?
Legends.
Yeah.
Or if you have both.
Yeah, I have both.
Both would work.
Basically, we don't really know when the Jedi joined the Republic in current canon. Mm-hmm. It just it happened at some point. Yeah. That is all we really know. And sometime after that, they demilitarized. In terms of the Legends thing, the first instance... It's pre-Sith. Definitely, it's a pre-Sith conflict when they joined the Republic, and it was initially they knew of the Republic. They stayed away. Mm-hmm. The Jedi stayed on. I think they were at Ossus at the time. They moved from Tython to Ossus after a Force war, but they were on Ossus, and the other Force traditions came to them to learn, and they absorbed and built their culture out of that. But they avoided conflict. It wasn't actually until...
Would you say around almost Mandalorian Wars time? Or?
No, it was much before that. When the Jedi had another civil war on Ossus, and the Republic decided that they wanted to back the Jedi because their ideals were in line with Republic ideals. Mm-hmm. So the Republic actually sent aid to the Jedi in that conflict, and tensions between them were better. And the Jedi did join, but there are at least one, maybe two, I'll have to check my notes, instances where the Republic did something that the Jedi were not all about, and the Jedi, they exited and came back. So that happened at least once, I think maybe twice. No. And again, that is a Legends source.
Yeah. When they did join the Republic, did they join as like a member state almost, or did they join as the law enforcement sort of thing that we see in the prequels?
Neither. They joined as Well, closer to the state thing.
Okay.
They joined as, we are these monks who can use this power known as the Force, and we recognize the Republic as the governing entity that is in line with our ideas. But it took years, it took to a different conflict to get the Jedi involved in military and peacekeeping operations.
Gotcha.
So actually, the Jedi warned the Republic that there was a conflict coming. The Republic did little to prepare, and because of that, because they were unprepared, the Jedi entered the conflict as commanders for the Republic, very similarly to how we see it happen in the Clone Wars. In the Clone Wars.
Okay.
But after that conflict, and this is the example I was talking about, in order to secure victory, the Republic wiped out an entire world, and the Jedi cut ties with them then and there because they were horrified with the actions. After that, they didn't rejoin the Republic until there was an insane chancellor that nearly destroyed it. Basically, think Palpatine, but...
like overboard.
Like, he went nuts and was tearing everything down and declaring himself a warlord and splinter groups. The Jedi did essentially what they attempted to do to Palpatine, which we'll get into, I know, at some point. But they succeeded, and they had the support of the Republic, the common people, I guess, behind them to do it. And they actually installed a Jedi as chancellor until the Republic could fully rebuild.
Yeah.
So those are both two extreme examples of the Jedi not being involved in Republic politics and the Jedi completely being involved in Republic politics. The Great after the Great Hyperspace War that led to the creation of the Sith, that's when we get the relationship that we see in the films, more or less.
Okay.
So back to the question at hand, is it okay for the Republic to give power to a religious organization whose views might be different than the people of the government? Kai, you had a saying on that?
Yeah,
so.
It's just the Jedi won't. Well, I mean, it all depends on the situation. If the Jedi wish to be as involved or as not involved as they want to be, because in the end, all the decisions the Jedi do make is not based on one person's decision; it's on the consensus of the entire council. So,
I'm sorry, John. I'm gonna go more into a history lesson here to help answer the question. But one of the things that we see in Star Wars Extended Universe and Legends and all these stories is we have the cyclical rise and fall of good and evil of these factions that we see in the films. But this is something that happened over millennia. I think it's important to understand that the Jedi are not the same Jedi that they were, like in the movies. Luke Skywalker's Jedi aren't the same Jedi as Yoda's Jedi.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And Obi-Wan Kenobi is not the same as an old mentor as he was when he was Qui-Gon Jinn's Padawan.
Mm-hmm.
We see in the movies, galactic power changes hands 3 times within a normal human lifespan. And what we have to consider is thousands and thousands of years of history behind both the Republic and the Jedi. So to answer your question, I think it's important to understand that there's a difference between the Jedi Order and their beliefs and religion and the Republic state, because the religion of the Jedi is not the same as the religion of the Republic. It's not a religious state.
Right.
I think that my personal theory is the Jedi aren't a tool of the Republic. They're a partner. They are the one force following of many, and there are many force followings out there, some benevolent, some neutral, some antagonistic, throughout all of time in this galaxy. They are the ones that are most akin to the Republic's value. Whenever there's any kind of power, there are going to be groups within it with benevolent and malevolent intentions, and everywhere in between on that spectrum. The Republic needed the Jedi to survive against other magic user factions, essentially, just as the Jedi need the support of the Republic to survive against forces that outnumber them, because a lot of these conflicts come from, well, there are these people with this magic power and they disagree with each other. So I think it's a symbiotic relationship other than a we are the state and we are allowing these monks to be our
arm, basically. Okay.
Yeah. And you have to consider, too, even though the Republic demilitarized, they demilitarized as a galactic force. They relied on system police forces and militias and system armies to police their own kind of areas. So the Jedi were the ones that were called in, not just to beat things down, but to be the diplomatic voice when those things had failed.
Yeah, and we see that in the very beginning of the Phantom Menace, where Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon Jinn, I kept wanting to say Anakin. My brain was saying, that's not correct, John.
That's because Kai keeps saying Anakin.
Anakin! So they're on the Trade Federation vessel, and they realize, well, they almost get killed, but they don't sit around to try to force the Republic's hand on the Trade Federation. They get off the ship to, warn Naboo, sort of thing, where they weren't being sent in to be the big stick of the Republic to force the Trade Federation to change, but to do the negotiation. But when the negotiation didn't work, they did something else.
And another way to look at it, I know I mentioned the symbiotic sort of theory, which is the one I personally subscribe to, but another way you can look at it is less of the Jedi imposing their will on the Republic, but the other way around, because the Republic wants to have the Jedi partnered with them because they want to have some amount of say and sway with a Force user group. Things do not go well for them when there are conflicts with other Force traditions involved. So they want to have their own space wizards on retainer, and the Jedi theology works best with the Republic's ideals. I hope that answers the question. I think I overcomplicated it.
The questions I wrote, they don't really have a definitive answer. I wrote them mostly to kind of do exactly what we did, which is start a discussion.
Right.
They're a little bit open ended, and I'm
fine with that. As long as you're satisfied.
Yeah. At the end of the day, we are talking about the politics of a fictional universe.
I most certainly have. It's a movie for 12-year-olds written somewhere in my notes.
But you were talking about kind of the demilitarization of the Republic. That's one of the things that I've always kind of wondered is, in Attack of the Clones, in in Phantom Menace, they talk about how they don't have a Republic army.
Right.
So I've always kind of wondered if the nation states, so to speak, nation systems, kind of maintain their own, and I mean that's kind of obvious because the Naboo had a defense force.
Right.
They had starships. The Trade Federation had warships, obviously, and so it kind of seems like the only militant force that was greenlit by the Republic on the Capital World was the Jedi, and then they're not. I wouldn't say they're naturally militant. It just kind of happens because they have this power.
Well, yeah, and it's not just that they have this power; it's that lots of people have this power, and they are forced to fight for their survival.
Right.
In terms of the green lighting of the thing, at least in Tor, they have Coruscant security forces.
Yeah.
Which acts as the police / military of
basically the big
the
policing body.
And we even see that too in Clone Wars. That still exists, and it's separate from.
Yeah, the only one that I could really think of in the Clone Wars, which would be a galactic government associated military, was the Umbaran that the clones fought.
Well, yeah,
and I guess the Geonosians kind of had a standing army.
Geonosians had a standing army. I
think in the prequels, in that area, I think a studio production sort of thing was to kind of move away from having humanoid antagonists.
Right.
And just replacing them with droids, because then you can have Jedi chop up droids. So I think it's more of a thematic reason why you don't see Jedi chopping up and biological.
Exactly. And the same reason why the Republic said, we need a Grand Army of the Republic. Sidious is wiggly fingers in the pies notwithstanding, is that the Separatists said, our defense forces are not good enough. We need to have a galactic scale military for our new nation. And so the Grand Army of the Republic, in the eyes of the people who were unaware that Sidious and Dooku and manipulated events that led to the creation of the Grand Army of the Republic, their thought of it is, this is a response to the CIS uprising and forming a galactic army.
That does actually kind of feed part of my official second question, which is, did Master Sifo-Dyas have a point about creating a military force for the Republic, in secret with Darth Tyrannus? That was his Darth
Tyrannus.
Did Master Sifo-Dyas have a point of creating a military force for the Republic, even though he was being deceived into doing so, notwithstanding? Because a result of this action does kind of lead to the Jedi being used less as that military force, a law enforcement force, when they have a government standard military force in the clones.
Well, in your defense, in defense of your argument here, they had the standing army with the clones, but then they put the Jedi in charge of that army. So, Kai, I'm going to let you take off on this one first, because then I have another history lesson.
With what Sifo-Dyas did, and the whole clone creating the army behind the lines kind of thing. In an honest answer and opinion, if the Jedi did know about this, and the Council, a side of me would have probably think that they would be in agreement, because as you've seen with Legends, you have people like Count Dooku and Qui-Gon Jinn who had views of the Republic and how the Jedi don't really have much of a place being in with the Republic, and how they saw how I guess the government, or some aspects of the government, were misusing the ideals of how the Jedi are supposed to be, and how some of the members of the Order were being misused. So I would believe that if the Council and the Order as a whole would have known about this army, I'm sure they would have been a bit more on board than when it was just flat out revealed to them that suddenly there's this clone army of well over, I don't know, how many clone troopers were there right when they were revealed?
That is not a number that I have off the top of my head.
I'm going to just say around
50.
Between like 5 and a lot.
I'm just gonna ring it here and say 50,000 clone troopers.
Oh, I would say it's more in the hundreds of thousands.
And if
250 maybe.
And
I don't know. We'll look at it later.
You've seen how the response Yoda was when the sudden appearance and news of this clone army. To if they would have known earlier, then I'm pretty sure the transition of the Republic's, the Jedi's involvement into the Republic would have lessened more over time once the clone army was finished. Then rather than being it spring on them and then suddenly the Republic having to say, hey, you Jedi over there, take this army and go ahead and do what you need to gain us victory.
Do you think it'd be something similar to what Ian was saying earlier, the cyclic nature of Star Wars, that after the Clone Wars, after the Jedi's military involvement with the clones being their commanders, that it would kind of go back to a thing of, well, there's no conflict anymore, the Jedi don't need to be
I'm pretty
charge.
I'm pretty sure if the Jedi would just be as what they would just be intended to be, which is just an advisory role instead of a more direct involvement. If that were to happen, I'm pretty sure probably they would have more time to, I guess, solve the mystery on what Dooku told Obi-Wan Geonosis when he was quote unquote captured at the moment of time.
I think the biggest reason why the Jedi go to war, and I'm speaking historically as well as in reference to the Clone Wars, is it's something that they always do, that they preach against, and this is a big flaw. It's they fear the dark side, and every conflict that they've entered has been to do one of two things: either save a bunch of people because some of the Jedi were too neutral, or they entered the conflict because they feared whatever dark side entity was involved. We see this in the Clone War itself. They knew, because of Maul's appearance, that the Sith had returned and were plotting to do things. They were so afraid of that happening that they were willing to throw their lot in, protect the Republic, and by extension, protecting the Jedi, because it's a symbiotic relationship, against that threat without even really understanding it. And I think that's one of the biggest reasons why they fell. But the Jedi Order has fallen and come back multiple times. It's that issue of balance. There must be a perfect... what does that even mean? Every Force tradition interprets that differently, and I have my own theory on the way the Jedi interpret it. But the thing to remember is that the Jedi Order has started, risen, come into conflict, fallen, and started again. And in that starting point, there always is one. There's always a starting point. These people, these Force users who follow the light, have the power to help save life and stop harm. And they feel like they should use it. They should be wary of the dangers of letting passions rule them, but understand that these passions and emotions are natural, sentient parts of life and turn into part of the Force. And that's kind of an ideology that we see with Qui-Gon Jinn. But that's always the point that the Jedi Order starts. Luke, Yoda, Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan, Revan, Mitra Surik, who restarted the Order in Knights of the Old Republic 2 after it got decimated during the Revan's conflict. Anakin at his peak, Kyle Katarn. All of these people understood it one way or another. They were very center light. They weren't gray, but they were like, the light side of the Force is a good way, but we have to kind of not go overboard with our rules, regulations, restrictions, understand that people are just going to be people no matter what, and just strive for the goodness. It's only when the Order grows large enough and fears failure, when the fears of failure overshadow the mission of peace, that's when we see the Jedi fall. So, yeah, that's kind of why I think they threw their lot in with the clones. As for Sifo Dyas, did he have a point in creating the clone army? Yeah, I think he did. I think Kai's point is good. He may have seen an opportunity to remove Jedi even further from the need to be militant. This kind of backfired, but you can...
That's the way that I kind of saw it in that story in the Clone Wars, is that he did it with the intent, that kind of intention, to get the Order kind of back to its roots of, not being this galactic crusading force.
Well, I don't think it really was a galactic crusading force at the time of the creation of the clone army.
I would agree. I would agree that at that time, but I think...
But there are historical examples of that being fact.
Exactly, and without a Grand Army of the Republic being present, the Republic could call on the Jedi to become that again, but with the clones' presence, it was less likely that there would be the need for that, but
right.
And then made them commanders and generals instead.
That's where that fear comes in. That fear is a powerful thing. The Jedi feared the dark side overwhelming them, and the Republic feared failure so much that they wanted their best, most valuable resource in charge of this army. And both of them fell because they gave into that.
They were just...
It would be good to point out that the person in charge of this, appointing them, was also not really keen on the Jedi having any more power.
A Sith Lord?
What?
You were going to say something, Kai?
I was just going to say that... darn, what was that? I was just going to say that same fear... like, if you were to watch all the Clone Wars and... along with the prequels, you would see that the Jedi were this close onto solving this whole mystery of, how did this Grand Army was made? How are we missing all like Maul? And then suddenly, when what do you call what's his name? When Dooku left the Order, then he started. Then they started seeing him as a sudden risen Sith, and if you were to read some of the, movies to books, and how they came across Obi-Wan telling the council about Dooku's warning, and that this fear that this fear that it may being true, that they were this close onto solving it, but it was kind of too little too late into doing so. And it's that same fear that I would say drove their one-up life, being that Anakin, into probably pushing the favor and ending the threat of the Sith, but with them not believing and being fearful on what on the surroundings and on Anakin was, pushed them to their inevitable fate of falling from the high pedestal to their downfall.
Yeah, I didn't even think of the Anakin thing until you mentioned it. Anakin throws a huge spanner in the works because he is said to bring balance to the Force. What the Jedi think that mean, I have a theory on. I'll get to it in a second. But this is happening at a time... He has appeared at a time of grand-scale conflict between light and dark. So their fear of not, being able to hold on to Anakin as a resource, this is the chosen one, we better not lose him, is what eventually made them lose. So I guess one of the things that I'm trying to say here is the Jedi Order that I love, the one that I feel is the ideal version, is not what we see in the prequels. That is them at the peak of their power, the height of their fear, and the beginning of their folly. And we've seen that in many conflicts in the past, EU-wise, Legends-wise. And we see it going forward as well. Luke Skywalker's fear of losing Kylo Ren, much like the Jedi Order's fear of losing Anakin Skywalker, is what led to them losing them in the first place. My ideal is what these people come to be after those things. Luke Skywalker became the ideal Jedi in the original trilogy for me. He struggled against the darkness and came out on top because he understood that the old way is not the best thing. Revan did the same thing. Mitra Surik did the same thing. Every instance of rebuilding the Order starts with somebody going in and saying, we did this all wrong. We held on to control too tightly. We need to understand that we're all just people and do our best. And that is where I think the words that Yoda says in The Last Jedi are probably my favorite part of that entire movie. It's when he says, "Heeded my words not, did you? Pass on what you have learned. Strength, mastery, but weakness, folly, failure also. Yes, failure most of all. The greatest teacher failure is. We are what they grow beyond. that is the true burden of all masters. And I think that is a very small sentence that Yoda was saying to Luke, but it exemplifies the cycle that the Jedi go through in terms of the combat, conflict, fall, revival, realization, stricter rules, bigger growth, conflict, fall, blah, 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 blah. I like how I ended that with blah, 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 blah.
I appreciated that. I think the answer to my question is somewhere in there.
Right.
And I don't think anything in the last 5 minutes had anything to do with Sifo-Dyas, unless you go down like a line of thought. But I think
it definitely was a line of thought thing. But the end of I think the point, to answer your question about Sifo-Dyas, is that did he have a point? Yes, it was. If we create this grand army of the Republic, we won't have to be the warriors. We can go back to just being the diplomats, the advisors, and occasionally keepers of the peace if we absolutely need to go to violence. And then it just backfired on him.
Right.
Because Sidious is all too knowing.
Yeah, Sidious just sitting in his chair with his hood up going, do it, do it, do it, do it, do it, do it.
So I've got one last question.
Hopefully we can answer it.
I am 90% sure that it has been answered like 5 times.
Sure.
But I said I had 3 questions, and so I'm going to read the third one. Question 3. As a bonus question, has the Jedi Order always been militant, or did that evolve from a with great power comes great responsibility line of thinking?
Yeah. It's that line of thinking that just starts the cycle.
Gotcha.
It's we are peaceful. We follow life. We follow the light side. And they came. It's important to notice that and we have a friend who is very insistent on reminding us of this point, that the Jedi came from a force neutral sect. Mm-hmm. They came from the Jedai'i, which I'm not just butchering the thing. That's actually how it's pronounced. All their entire goal was just to research the Force, both the light and the dark. That's the Bogon and what's the light side called? I have it in my notes. Ashla. Whenever you have power, whenever you have that power, that question is going to arise. We have great power. Do we have great responsibility? That's kind of what the light side people thought. And the dark side people were like, no, this power was given us to rule and to exploit for our gain. Mm-hmm. And no matter how neutral you want to be in that, when presented with superpowered people, I mean, this is not unique to Star Wars. We see it in superhero comics. We see it in real life stories. We see it in historical examples. Whenever somebody has power, they make a decision on what to do with it. And that is ever more enhanced when you look at magical power, right? Mm-hmm. So even if you spring from, you're going to have those fringe elements that are eventually going to come into conflict. It's just inevitable. And, there are gray Jedi out there who say, well, I'm gray, I'm in the center. But they're comparing themselves to the extremes. Really, it's a gradient. So I think a lot of people who feel that they are gray Jedi supporters, they really kind of fall more on the light side than the dark. And then there are people who fall more on the dark side than the light. Nobody is truly center. Or if you are, it's not, you're outnumbered. Mm-hmm. So it's that thing, with great power comes great responsibility. And I agree. Yeah, that's how it starts. That's how the cycle starts.
Yeah, just going on from what Kiss said about.
By the way, I'm Kissed. Ian is Kissed. That's we met in a video game. And that's my handle. So if you hear him reference that, mm-hmm. That's me.
But going on what he said, and then on to the question about with great power and all that stuff, I would honestly look at 3 prominent members of the Order, or in past and or just in history in general, and but I would say Plo Koon, Qui-Gon Jinn, and honestly, I would also reference Revan too, but mostly on someone like Plo Koon, who in Legends, because I don't know if it's officially canonized yet or not. He was one of the members in the Jedi Order who learned a form of a Force light, a Force lightning, but in a more of a light side way, which was called Electric Judgment. But it wasn't. It was an ability that he acknowledged that the only time to use it was, at key moments in which he believed that it was right to use it, but
there was no other options.
When there was no other options on the table, and if he deemed it right. But Plo Koon was more of the Jedi Master that believed certain actions that Jedi make are always based on situation, and if the situation called for him to be more affirmative and more direct, then he would proceed and do so. But if he saw the situation can be talked out, like for example when Boba Fett was holding someone hostage, and he knelt down and talked to him peacefully and said that people are gonna die, please give me the location, and he didn't use any type of force. He made Boba make the right decision, and from then on there, he proceeded to go to his objective and complete whatever he needed to do.
Yeah, it's important to realize that even though that the Jedi, people like to lump all the Jedi into one group of you're all a bunch of pious monks with too many rules, and that's why you're bad. And it's important to realize that even within its own members, there were many different kind of ideas and philosophies about the Force. Qui-Gon Jinn's a great example. Plo Koon's another great example. I could talk about that for years. I'm sure I will in a later episode. But yeah, very very good point. Real quick before we could talk about this and go on and on and on. I think. But
why do that when we can save it for another episode?
I agree. We'll pick up this discussion another time. I'd like to go into some of the force, the more forcey aspects of it. I think we leaned a little political this time.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll get a little bit more of that. Ray's got them books. From the tree, the sacred texts.
We don't know that she can read, though.
Yes, we can.
It might be an old basic.
Okay, I know she can read because she flies ships that have readouts. I will concede she might not be able to read what's in those books.
They may be in High Galactic, which is just English.
Even if she can't read them, like Yoda said, they're not really page turners.
Maybe she can force read them.
That is an ability, actually.
I know it is.
Yeah.
That's why I'm sad.
Mm-hmm. You say words, and it's probably just going to be a force ability.
Yeah, I wanna thank you and Kai for taking my questions and not nerd raging on them. That truly wasn't the intention. And I'm glad that we got a good discussion out of it. Behind the scenes thing is I actually had to cut Ian off from reading stuff so that we'd have content for you later down the road.
Yeah, and I was like, no, it all connects, but I took a minute and I realized that we can turn this into another thing that's more forced discussion based. Well, Kai, thank you very much for being a guest on this episode.
No problem.
It was really good having you here. You were a surprise guest. We didn't make the decision to have you on until like 11 o'clock last night.
They captured my Noeticon.
Yeah. I'd like to thank everybody for listening to this episode of Hoth Topics. We have other episodes up on our website, hothtopicspodcast.com. You can also find some articles about updates, new projects, and opinion pieces. You can also listen to us on iTunes, Google Play, and YouTube. What did you think about today's discussion? It was a doozy. Tweet at us with @Hothpod or shoot us an email at hothpod@gmail.com. We really want to hear from you. Honestly, just give us feedback because that's how we're going to get better and know that you guys are listening. So,
I mean, we can assume that if we get no feedback, that we are already at the top of our game.
That's what I'm
Right?
choosing to do now.
Okay, cool. We're on the same page.
I need a little bit of validation, though. I'm that kind of diva. So, yeah, thank you, everybody. I think the next time you hear from us, May the 4th will have already passed, so I hope you had a fantastic May the 4th.
I hope you've had a fantastic Revenge of the 5th.
I've been Ian.
I have to go set up a studio so that we can watch movies for May the 5th, 4th.
May the 5th, 4th.
May the something. I don't know. Whatever.
That's John.
And it's Kai.
Thank you very much, everybody. We will see you next time. Outro music. It's happening now.
You should have done that.
The audience can still hear me.